All right, so for today's class, we'll be looking at response model, status code, and handling of errors. Right, so these are just big names, right? The whole concept is pretty simple, right? The whole concept is pretty simple, and hopefully, if we could wrap this thing quickly on time, and we still have a few time left, maybe we could explore other parameters that we did not touch in our parameters classes, right? So far we only covered three means of receiving data, right? And that is via the JSON form, that's the structured data, or we could do via the path parameter or via the query parameter or the body parameter, whichever one that we see convenient. We could use any of that to receive data. And we are also familiar with the fact that because we are dealing with endpoints, it means that every interaction is done via request. So your print and your input now becomes your response and your parameters, and then interaction is done via request. So I believe we are all um, we all understood that particular concept, because these other new concepts would be what would be to do what to add on top of the previous things that we've done in our previous classes. All right, so I'm not sure that there's any question pertaining to any of our previous classes, but if there's anyone, now would be the time to unmute and ask. So while we are loading up our VS Code, we could attend to that question. Any question pertaining to previous classes before we add this new concept? Yes, I think someone also made mention that I should push in current codes to repo, so you guys can get that. So that should be done at the end of this class. Question pertaining to previous classes. All right, so we already know that so far we've moved from KodeCamp 5.0, right? To KodeCamp 5.0 endpoints, right? So this is where we have our entire source code, right? So what I want to do as usual is something that we are already familiar with. I have to open this in my command prompt. And the reason why I have to open that folder is so that I can activate my virtual environment, being the library box, and then navigate to our actual source code, right? So to do that, our library box, you simply say a library box, /script /activate, right? So that now gives us all the dependencies and everything that we've installed so far for this project. So we can have access to that now that is actively running. So now we could just move to our main folder. So cd into main, and then we can open up our main folder in VS Code. All right, so I think I have some weird files here. So for some reason, let me cut this out, please. Hold on. Hold on. I think this one's will add. I think that's all. All right, so this is what we have so far, and I think for some reason I had to zoom this way out, so I believe it's visible and it's fitting well on you guys' screen, right? If there is need for me to shrink it back, please let me know so I can shrink it back. Right, I had to zoom this for I was actually doing something when off class session, and I had to zoom this out. So please, I want to ensure that this zooming out is convenient for you guys, or I could just shrink it back to how it was, right? Okay, so this is where we left us in our previous class, right? So we looked at the different parameters, right? The different means of of the different means of accepting data, right, via parameters. So we looked at the request body, and we looked at the query, we looked at the path as well, right? And of course, one URL, right, one endpoint can comprise of all these three means of accepting data, right? So there is no law that says once, and there's no law that says there's no law that says we've used a query parameter in one endpoint, we can't use any other parameter for that endpoint. No, that's not true, right? You can use as many parameters as we want for one particular endpoint, right? Just that it will make that endpoint complicated for whoever intend to actually use it. So imagine an endpoint where you have to pass in the path, pass in the query, pass in the request body, pass in the header, the cookie, and so on and so forth. Right? It makes it really complicated for other people to actually use it, but it doesn't mean that it does not work. It will work, right? But it's not actually recommended. Right. So we'll just add to what we've learned so far. And like I said, if time still permits, we'll come back and we'll look at the remaining parameters that we have here in Fast API. But for today's class, we'll focus on response model, right? We'll focus on response model. And then we'll further look at return type and then status code and hopefully error handling. So that's more like four concepts, but those things are quite simple and straightforward, right? So it shouldn't actually take us more than 30 minutes, right? So that's one of the reasons why I packed all of them and then fixed them in one class, right? They are pretty straightforward. Okay, so as usual, I will just create a new file, right? I'll create a new file so we can have these files separately from one another, right? And then each file will be treated as what as a new project, right? So far, none of these files is interacting with one another. So we are treating each file as a new project, right? So what I'll do is I'll just come here and then I'll create a new file, and this file I'll just call it response. Maybe something like I don't know. I can call it okay, let's call it response. And the fact that we are covering like four concepts makes it more difficult to even name this file. Right, but let's call this maybe response underscore model dot py. Right, please. Response underscore model will conclude and will include those remaining three concepts, even if that file name actually points to just one specific concept. Right, so keep that in mind. So what exactly is response model? You want to basically ask what exactly is response model. So in a simplest term possible, right? Response model is more like a means of structuring your data. That is what a means of structuring and validating your request response, right? So what do I mean? So we know that to interact with our endpoint, that a request is sent. Right? I think I have that illustration somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. So I can just use that and we communicate with that. I think it should be in it. But for some reason I can't find it. Okay, let's just put it down there. All right. So that to interact with our endpoint, that a request needs to be sent, right? And of course, this request can come with the optional parameter, right? That's if we intend to do what to say in data, right? And then this request is somehow being sent to our endpoint, and that is our URL. And in turn, our endpoint do what we send out response, right? We send out response. And of course, our response are always structured because all our response must come in a JSON form, right? In a JSON form. But then the parameters can come in any specific kind of form, like a path parameter, the query, the JSON form, or even a form data and the rest of them, right? But then our response is one unique structure, which is what a JSON structure, right? Now, what's the whole point of bringing in this response model? So this response model is responsible for what? For making sure that whatever is leaving a particular endpoint matches a specific class, not really a class, a specific structure, right? So basically, we define a structure for each response for an endpoint, and then that can validate and filter out whatever you're sending out. That way, it prevents your endpoint, or it prevents you as a developer from mistakenly doing what, sending out information that wasn't meant to be sent out, right? Take for instance, someone actually signs up, right? You could mistakenly just after receiving that data and maybe preparing it, right? You could mistakenly send out that entire data again, right? And by so doing, you know what, you end up sending out that person's what password, right? So such instances may actually occur. So that is why we need response model where we can know where we can put in place, right? Where we can put in place, and that will validate and make sure that whatever is going out matches a specific structure and a specific type of data that is being sent out. So that's basically the whole point of what of a response model. Do you understand? So let me put that down as note. So response model, right? Response model basically it defines, right? Basically defines, let's put it, defines the structure, I would say, the structure and type, right? So apart from just structure, it also defines both structure and type of data that is being returned, let me put that is being returned by your endpoint. So that's basically what response model does, right? So it defines a structure and type. So these two things are kind of together, right? Both structure and type. And I think it can also as well add other kinds of validation, right? And all right, so sorry about that, guys. It seems that the usual ministry has started again. Please, this should not be a usual thing in this country, but that's happened. It has happened. All right. Okay. So okay. Sorry about that. Sorry about that break in transmission or in communication. All right. So I was saying that response model, their duty or their whole point or the whole purpose of them being in existence for Fast API is what it defines structure and type of data that is being returned by your endpoint. So that way you don't send out things that were not meant to send out, or you don't send out a wrong kind of data that wasn't meant to be sent out. So that is the whole point of response model. And let's see how we can put this into implementation. So like I said, this concept is very simple, right? It's very simple and straightforward, right? So let's put that into let's put that into practice and see how that goes. So I'll comment on this, right? And like I said, each file, we'll consider each file as what as a new project, right? So we don't have to worry about the repetition of what of instance of fast API at multiple points, right? So I'll just copy this man because this is basically how your fast API project starts or begins. And we'll come down and then we'll just paste this one. Right, so we likely not need this man, but maybe we'll somehow need that man. But for now, let's just leave it there. All right. So now the thing now is that now what do we need to do now? Now we need to start creating our endpoint, right? So to start creating our endpoint, I would simply just go back and just copy because that's the whole point of being a developer. Copy and paste and wait. So I'll copy this endpoint, and because why I'm copying it because I assume that we're already familiar with how endpoints should be created or what makes up an endpoint, right? So I want to assume that we're already familiar with that, so it should not really be much of an issue. All right, so I will call this endpoint, this particular endpoint, I will call this endpoint user registration, right? User registration, right? Registration. All right. So basically, what this endpoint will do is to collect user details for signing up in our platform, right? I'm assuming that basically that's what we'll be doing. That we want to do that we want to collect I'll call this message, right? And then for now I'll just say success, nothing really much, right? Success, and then say success. All right. So that is a basic endpoint that we've just created. The endpoint that says, sorry, this will be dash. Please normalize using dash for your endpoint, right? Normalize using dash for your endpoint, because you will rarely see an actual endpoint that comes with underscore. So they're mostly dash, right? So but then when dealing with Python variables or function names or stuff like that, then you can actually use underscores, right? So, but then when it comes to path, yeah, please normalize using dash if you intend to separate those words, right? If you intend to separate those words. All right. So this is in our endpoint. Oh boy, this well. All right. So like I was saying, so I was saying, so when declaring your path like this, right? Please normalize using dashes there and not underscore. But when dealing with function names, right, or Python variables, then you could normalize using underscores to separate words. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's make sure that this endpoint is working as expected, and then we see how we can bring in our response model and the rest of those things. Okay, so let's go back and let's go back and let's make sure that this is working. So let's bring up our postman, because we intend this man to accept a post request, right? So it means that our browser will not do the trick for us. Our browser is only built by default to only send get requests. So that means we somehow need postman. So I'll bring up postman, which I'm sure that we've also installed this man. So please, I think for explanation's sake, this postman is only meant for tax for testing your endpoint at your own end, right? At your end. Please don't bundle postman installation file and submit it, please. Postman is only meant for you to use it at your own ends and test your endpoint, and not meant for you to submit it, please. Don't put the installation file and submit, please. All right, so while postman is coming up, while postman is coming up, let's do what let's find a means of accepting data. So far I want this route to accept this kind of data, right? I want this route to accept someone's first name, right? Someone's first name, right? Someone's last name, someone's email, and maybe someone's password, right? So basically, I want to accept this kind of thing. And you can see that this data is much, right? It's not actually like one single value or one single piece of data. They are much, like the first name, the last name, the email, and the password. So so far, among the three parameters that we've covered so far, the request body seems convenient enough for me to do what, use and collect all this information all at once, right? Because it will somehow do what, put it in a structured form and then just send it for us. It looks more convenient and more recommended, unlike passing all these things via URLs, right? So I'll option in for what, for the request body, and we are already familiar with how this works, right? We are already familiar with how this works. So what we do, we need to somehow do what, create a class that inherits from the base model from a pedantic class. We already know as well that what that behind that under the hood, all validations and all validations, right, is being done by this man called pedantic, right? Right? It's a third-party model, right? But Fast API does include it and uses it for its data validations, right? So to make use of request body, like we saw in our previous class, we have to do what, we have to establish Fast API makes it mandatory that structured data that is coming in must be validated, right? So unlike the query and the path parameter, we could just send them in, right? With little to no violations. But when it comes to structured data, that is your JSON data that comes in via the request body, that data must be validated, right? So Fast API makes it compulsory that it must be validated. So because it must be validated, we have to do what we have to create a class that inherits from where from the base model that should include all the field that we are expecting alongside with what with their validations, right? So what do I mean? I have to come here and create a class. So this class, I can call this class user rec, right? I can call it user rec, right? And this class needs to inherit. So if you remember, I thought that we should look at inheritance in classes back then. So to inherit something from a class, you simply need to bring in what the this bracket, and within this bracket, you include that class that you're inheriting from. So in this case, the class here is what is base model, right? So that's the class that Pydantic uses to what to carry out all violations. So I'll recap again. Like I said, Pydantic, right, or set a fast API, make sure that what that any structured data that is coming in, it must be what it must be violated. Unlike your path and query can have little to no what violations. But when it comes to structured data that is coming in via the request, but because that is where what that is where structured data is coming in from. It's coming in the body section of that request. Now that structured data, it is a must that what that it must have at least a basic violation. And because it is structured, so basically, the rule says or the law says that what that you have to create a class that carries all the expected fields alongside with it what with its basic or more what validations, right? So that class is what we are creating here, and because we want parenting to handle, not really because we want to, it's because Fast API uses Pydantic for these validations. This our class needs to do what need to inherit from the class that handles that validation, which in this case is what is the base model, right? So we are inheriting it from there, and then we do what we bring it our column, and then under these classes we list out all the expected fields, right? All the expected fields of that structured data, which in this case I will assume that what that we're expecting what first name, right? I will expecting first name, right? So you may wondering how will the front end guys know that what they're expecting for all these kind of fields? Of course, once we create this class, it also appears in documentation. So once we hand them that documentation, they know what they are sending, what the expected fields, what we are expecting, right? So you don't have to worry much about. So in this case, this is assumed to be what to be the field name, and of course you can do what you can pass in your basic variation, which in this case I can say what string, str string, right? Very basic validation, right? If you want more, of course, if you want to have a more complicated validation, so just like what we did, I think in our previous class here, where you can bring in part function or where you can bring in part function or query function and add more validation. You can do that for a request body too. But remember, the request body is being handled directly by Pydantic. So that means every violation that comes in somehow need to come via Pydantic, right? So how do we add additional violation? So it's pretty simple. All you have to do is simply just go to the same model that we imported the base model, right? The same model that we imported the base model. We can go there and we import what field. There is a field model. There is a field function that also lives in this Pydantic model there. Right. So this field function is what we can come here and then we can assign this to whatever field that or whatever expected field, and then we can add additional variation. So if you look at what we have here, the moment you invoke field to that the field function to this particular expected field first name, we have similar validation or similar means of validation compared to the query function and the path function. So this way we can add additional variation if we need to, or if we see fit, or if you want to, right? So that is basically how you can add additional variation if you want. So in this case, I could say that I want a minimum length, right? So it means that what I want a minimum length of character for a first name to be 3. So that means that for your first name to be a valid first name, it should be at least more than what 3 character or a minimum award of 3 characters. So you can see that is additional variation compared to us to just being what a string data type. And of course, we have as many other what variations as possible. So in your spare time, you guys can actually just try out all of them and see what they actually do, right? But there's no law that says that you must memorize all these variations, right? If you just try out the most commonly used ones, right? And see how they behave, right? And see how they behave. So that is how you add additional variation, right? So I'll move on to the next field. In this case, the next field, what is the last name, right? So I could also have the same variation here. So here I could say last name. And here I could say last name, right? Last name. So I'm also expecting a field in that response body called last name, and that field should be a string and should also have a minimum character of 3, right? Then the next password is email. So email, okay, sorry about that. So here email is a little bit tricky because right now Python, right, that doesn't really have email type, right? So we can also use string, which works, right? Which works. But there's a problem. Someone can put in any random string there, right? Even if it doesn't really conform to an email structure. So how do we resolve this issue? How do we resolve, or how do we handle this situation? So the good thing is that Pydantic has a class called email. Sorry, has a type called email string. Yeah, I think email string. So Pydantic has a type called email string, and basically what you need to do is you somehow need to install that type, because the thing is that when we install fast API in turn install Pydantic with its basic type, right? So the email type was not installed alongside that installation. So what we have to do is that we have to come back and do what, and wrap up and also and install that email type, so that we can do what, import it and use it for what, for this particular verification there. But for now, we will leave it as string. We'll come back and we'll fix that, right? We'll come back and we'll fix that real soon. Okay, so the next thing you want again is what is the password. Is the password, right? So the password, and of course, password would be what would be a string, and maybe we can also have a minimum of this if you want. But for now, I can leave it, right? I can leave it. I can even write a regex that actually checks if this password actually contains uppercase, at least one uppercase, at least one lowercase, one number, and one special character, and stuff like that. That if you want to further add more complex validation, if you want, right? But for now, we'll leave this as it is. So this is what Fast API says, that every structured data, that is every data that comes in the body section of the request, but which is usually what a JSON data, must be validated. And in order to carry out that violation, parenting needs to into play. All right. So basically, we do what, we create a class, we inherit from Pydantic, and then we list out all the fields that we're expecting alongside one with its validation. So we cannot actually escape it. It's not possible to bring in a structured data and not validate it. Right. So that's one thing. That's one key point that you should put in mind. Every structured form must come with with this ministry and with this validation concept. All right. So now that we've listed that out, now how do we now accept this? How do we now accept this data? Or how do we now tell Fast API that this endpoint should be expecting a structured data in the body section? So we already saw it. We simply come here and then what, we pass in a variable. So I could say user, assuming. Now we also know that if I leave this user as it is, right, automatically Fast API will see it as what? As a query parameter, right? If I leave user as it is, Fast API will see it as a query parameter, right? All right, so I think there is so Barry is asking if you could add those variations that we usually see in the website where password must contain at least one uppercase, one lowercase, one number, and one special character. Right, we'll come back and we'll do that if time permits. We'll come back and we'll implement that concept, right? We'll come back and we'll implement that soon. Okay, so back to what we're doing, right? So so like I was saying, if we leave this variable user in this route function as it is, Fast API automatically sees it as what, as a query parameter, which in this case is not what we want. And also, if we also have the same user as a variable that lives within this path, right, it's also seen as what, as path parameter. So how does Fast API now identify that this user variable should hold a parameter or a data that is coming in the body section of a request? So it's simple. We simply just give it a type of the class that we've created, right? In preparation for for that structured data. That's simple. So simply come here, and the type here would be what would be this class that we just created. Now, once we do that, Fast API now knows, right, that this variable will be holding a data that is coming in the body section, right, in the body section of our request, right? So that means if I should print out this man, I should be able to do what to see whatever the user has sent in via what via the body section in a structured form, right? Please, I believe that we are all following. All right, so let's now that we have that, I think we are good to go, right? So let's just go back and let's see how this man work. All right, so our postman is up and running. All right, so what we have to do now is what we have to do now is so don't save. So what I have to do now is to just run this man and let's see if it's working. So I think we already have a URL like that. So let's compare that it matches our user registration. All right, so that is working. Now what we have to do now is make sure that whether our server or our browser, yes, our server is up and running. So basically, what do we mean by a server? That our instance of web development, or just say, the generation of what of the base URL is up and running, right? That's basically what I mean by running up your server. Okay, so let's go down and let's see that, and also say let's go back and let's make that to happen. So we already know that what the UVCon is the man responsible for doing that magic. So we have to bring in UVCon and somehow reference the file that's what that holds the instance of our Fast API, because that is where our program begins, right? So that file is in this case here, the file here is what is response model, right? So let's go back and let's open response model. So response underscore model, and then colon the instance of Fast API, which in this case is app member. So this is the instance of our Fast API, this one, right? And then we go back again, and then we simply just click on enter. All right, so that will bring our server live. All right, so we have our server up and running, so we are good to go. All right, so let's go back again and let's fire up this request. So far now, if we try to send in this request as it is, then this should tell us that something is missing, right? Something has that we are missing to send in what we are missing to send in. We are missing to send in. How do you call it? We are missing to send in the request body, right? There's something is missing in the body section of this request. So if I fire up this response, this should not run error. So let's compare that. Oh, so we already have something like that already. So let's cut this out and let's send this again. So we do this. This tells us that we are missing something in the request body, right? So also we already, I think we already tested this kind of concept before, right, in our previous class. So I'll paste back what we have. So far this is what we have, right? We have the first name, of course, that was sent in the body section. So basically what you are seeing here is more like the body sections of your request. So Postman helps you to do what, to simulate those kinds of things, those section parts, and then put those data, right? So in the body section, and we can put in our JSON form, right? Our JSON or our structured data, which in this case is we have the first name that we've established, the last name, the email, and the password, right? And the password here being password. But then if I should now fire this request, we now somehow have success, right? But then most times we will likely want to just let the user know, or let the front end guys know that it was successful, and alongside that we also want to do what, to show them this user, right? So maybe we could have something like this, right? Maybe we could have something like this, and then if I paste this out man now, so if I should go back again and let's refresh our server, and then we come here again, and then we fire up this request again. So you see that actually went into, so you can have a status code here of success, which said that request was successful, right? This is the response that we received. But you see, the problem is that we've mistakenly, or at some point, we may forget these things, right? You may look and say that we can never do such mistakes, but trust me, it's very possible, right? It's very possible to do what, to make such mistake. So now what we've seen here is that we've sent back this user sensitive information, which in this case is this user's password, right? If someone should lay hand on that request, if an attacker should lay hand on this request, the attacker will simply get everything about that particular user. As such, can have access to the user's account, right? And which is not really a good thing. So what can we do in this kind of situation? Well, we can manually, right? We can manually do what? Exclude this man. But like I said, manually, we are likely to what to actually forget it at one point in time. We will like it's something that can happen. It's because no one is above mistake, right? We can likely forget to pull out some sensitive what information while sending out the rest of the information. So manually would not really do the trick, or even though it will do the trick now we've remembered it. But then most time we may not actually remember it, right? So in this case, how would we simply do this? How would we simply resolve this issue? So to resolve this problem, well, first API says that we can use what we call a response model, right? That we can also define a structure similar to what we've done here, right? That we can define a structure like this, or what of the kind of data that we intend to do what to return. So because it is similar to this man, I can simply do what copy this man. So it's basically the same thing, right? But then the difference is that is how it's being used, right? So this one, I can call this one user relation out, right? So this out means the things that I want to return. So it means that when you submit this man, I only want to return your first name, email, and first name, last name, and what an email without password. So I can take this man out, right? I can take this man out. Now we have what two class. The first class is to validate what comes in. The other one is to validate what goes out. So now how do we now apply this class into what goes out? So that whatever is not actually so that whatever we are sending out that doesn't match what we've already established, right? At least the compiler should somehow let us know that there's a problem, or the compiler should do what should somehow automatically remove that particular part if it's not available, right? So how do we solve that? So it's like I said, it's pretty simple. So first step is to define the structure of what we intend to send out. Right. So please note that what the response model is only works for sending out structured data. Right. So if you're sending out one single value like hi or 10, right, then response model is not really anything that you want to actually bring in here. But most of the time, you will mostly be sending out what structured data. Most of the time we mostly be sending out structured data, right? So let's go back and let's see. All right. So first of all, do what we define this class or the model that handles what goes out, right? And then we of course this well since Pydantic is responsible for all directions. This class need to also do what inherit from Pydantic, and then we can do what we can list out the fields or in that structured data that we intend to do what to send out, right? And then we can of course, because we are using a structured data, we can pass in what violations, right? We can pass in violations. All right. So after we've done that, then how do we now use it? Because the usage is what determines if this should be used for validating what comes in, or if this should be used for validating what goes out, right? So the usage is pretty simple. So how do we use it? You simply come to now where you have your path, right? Where you have your path, there are so many things that can be accommodated here, right? So apart from just your path, right? Your path is what is the required thing that we want there, right? Path is the required thing. But then if you look at what we have now, there are other things that this path can that this function, this method function can collect, like the response model, which is what we've seen there, the status code, the tags, the dependency, summary, description, responses, duplicated, and operational ID, right? So that is basically a few of the things that this man can accept. But path is the required thing, right? So every other thing can be exempted, but path must be provided, right? So now that we know that this method functions can collect so many things. Of course, that is where we can come in and put in our response model, like we've seen there. So this man here can accept response model. So we simply come here and then you put a comma, and then we pass in what response model. So response model there. So response model will point to the class or to the structure of what you are expected to send out as a structured response, right? So in this case, we want this one man to be our user registration out, right? This man here, right? With that has been implemented. So it means that anything that we want to send out that does not conform to that structure, there will be a problem, right? There will be a problem. That way it makes us conscious of what we are sending out, right? So if I refresh my server again, right? If I refresh my server again, and then I refresh this again, and then go back and let's send this request one more time. So when I send this request again, now you see that the request went through, but the password is no longer available. So even if you define as many fields as possible, right? Even if you define as many things in your response structure, as far as that thing is not available in this particular response model, those things will be removed automatically, right? They remove automatically, like what we've just seen here. So every other thing stays, but then every other thing that was not included in that response model was removed. So we send in these things, and then this is what we are getting back without the password, right? So that is the whole point of response model. Question before we proceed. Question.
Hello, good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning.
Okay, please, I want to ask a question. Is it a, is there a way that a server could be refreshing anytime you edit or there's a change in the source code that you are coding? Because it
E-
seems you always refresh the server almost every time.
Yes, there is a means of doing that, but I think I remember very well. I said that I don't like that. It works differently on my own device. I don't know about other people's device. If the means is what is for basically for you to come here and then you add the dash reload flag. If you add this flag, your server will automatically reload for every changes that you have in your source code. But I've been in plenty situation, couple of much of them, right? Where if I do this and I'm working for a long time, right? My command prompt will not close again. It will not want to stop. It will just be lagging, right? It will just stay there. So I will basically need to go to my task manager and forcefully close my command prompt. So because I don't find that very, very wonderful, that's the reason why I always come and do mine manually. But if yours works fine, then there's no problem. You can add dash reload to this command that runs your server, right? And that will do what? That will make sure that your server keeps reloading for every changes that happens. Is that okay?
Thank you, sir.
All right. Okay. So let's go back again and please I'll take this out because I don't want to be in that situation. Not today. All right, so let's take this out and then let's go back and then let's okay. All right, so let's go back and let's look at our email because so far you can see that even if I don't really put an actual email here, I come here I put some basic string, right? This man will still go as expected, right? And which in normal sense that shouldn't really be the case. So if I send this now, and you see that email actually went through, right? It shows what as a valid email. That's because we simply said that that field should be what should be a string field, right? So we not really specify that it should be an email field. Normally we could write a bunch of function or a bunch of instructions that checks if that man follows a certain pattern. But what is the point of writing those functions when pedantic is there for us, right? When pedantic is there for us. So pedantic can do what can simply handle that without us going through the stress of writing and code just to violate email. So how does it happen? So like I said, and when Fast API and when we install Fast API now in turn installed and what pedantic, but then it did not actually install pedantic and its custom type because that email type is a custom pedantic type, but then not really the default pedantic type like in string and all those stuff, right? So that means we have to somehow install that custom type and then use it with our code. All right, so let's see how that installation works. So I think this can also be necessary because when at the end of this month, okay, you guys are done with lectures. So basically when you move to next month, which is the project phase. Of course, you will likely you'll be dealing with with real world project. So of course, when there is an email field should be email field and not some random strings, right? And not some. So let's just fix that up and then we check out other things. All right. So if I should also come here, so what I want to do is I'll stop my server, right? So because I need to install what Pydantic custom email type, right? So remember my virtual environment is still active, right? So I don't intend to install it globally. I only want this installation to happen within that box, right? And not in my global, and not in my global in my global directory where I have my Python installed, right? So let's do that and let's see how this installation works. So to install this custom type, it's simple. Well, we simply just use the pip. Remember, pip is basically Python installation manager, right? So everything that needs to be installed as third party, pip is the man that handles that, right? So pip install, right? And then the package that we want, which in this case would be in quote. I don't think this quote is necessary, but then Pydantic, and then in square bracket, email, and then square bracket close. So here you are saying install the email type that belongs to the Pydantic model, right? So that would people go to your online, because remember people works via a network connection. So you to go online, check for what for this package and install it directly to our virtual box. That's simple, right? So let's go ahead and just hit on enter, and that should bring in that man Pydantic email. So that is coming up. So I think it says already satisfied. It looks like I already have it installed, right? So maybe yours may show differently. So if yours is showing requirements already satisfied, then it means that we've already installed that. So I think at some point during off class session, I somehow installed it, right? I somehow installed it. So I have it available. But if you don't have yours available, okay, that is how you do it. That is how you install it, right? So I'll run my server again. Okay, but before that, let me just go back and put that man in. Right, so let's go back and let's bring in this Pydantic email for email violation, right? For email violation. So how do we bring this man? So it's similar. Everything lives within what this Pydantic class. So the same way, in the same point where we imported the base model and the field, we can import email string. So email string is the type is a custom email type that makes sure that a particular field is an actual email. It conforms to actual email standard. Means that email has to have some string followed by @ followed by some string followed by .com. And that is a standard email structure, right? That's basically what that class will do. So I'll copy that class and then just replace this string with this class, and also do the same thing to our response model, right? So that makes sure that whatever is coming and whatever is going out actually correspond to this email standard, right? And that is that. So I'll simply go back again and run our server. Okay. So it's up and running. So that when we now go back again to try to make this request, Pydantic will now handle that violation and tell you that email is not valid, right? So without even writing much code. So that is the beauty of Fast API. You don't even need to write much code. Fast API basically writes almost everything for you, right? So you click on send again. This should not tell that we have a problem, right? The problem here is 422, right? So remember, every request has a status code. So if you don't know what it does or what a status code mean, you can always look it up, right? So every response comes with a status code. Like this one, it comes with 422. It means that the request was well formed but had a semantic error, right? There's a problem with either of the field. All right. So in this case, if you read the detail, it says that in the body section there is an email field, and the value is not a valid email address. Then an email address must have an @ right? Well, that is what we inputted, right? So this handling, this error handling, is coming from where? From Pydantic, right? Very beautiful thing. Very beautiful thing. So I can simply come back here and do what, and we put back our email as it were, and we should be good to go, right? So by now send this, click on this send, this should now go through successfully, right? So now we have a different response code. 200, right? So here means that the request was successful and the server has responded as required, right? So remember, every response. So most professional developers, when they send a request, the first thing they check is the code that comes from that request. So that they know that if there's a problem, they can simply just no. So what they want to do is that when they want to send a request, they check if the code is 200. If the code is not 200, they automatically know that there's a problem in that request, and then they can further go to make some findings about what must be the possible problem, right? But then every successful response is always 200, right? Anything outside of 200, there's a problem, right? Anything outside of 200, I think there's 404. 404 is mostly because you are sending requests to a wrong route. So that means if I come here and put like SSS there, which is a route that does not actually exist, all right? If I should send this request, we should have 404. 404 means not found. It means what? That the requested resource could not be found. It means that the URL that is specified for this request to be sent to is not available on that server, right? So as a back-end engineer, of course, response code should be your thing, right? You should be understanding what each of those code means, so that with those code you can simply just know what the problem is without even reading this detailed error. I just know that there's something wrong with the URL, right? 404 is mostly a URL related problem. But if you want to know the full detail of status code, it's easy. Just simply go to your browser. So like I said, this thing, there's no law that says you must know all these things in your head, right? So just simply go to your browser and just search for a comprehensive, I believe, so comprehensive status codes, and then you should be able to see all of them, all the standard web status code, right? This should show you all the standard web status codes. So you could just look at them and see what it does, right? So you could see. So we have 100, we have 101, we have 102. So 101 is mostly information and stored to indicate that server has received the in request and is continuing to process it, right? The status is mostly indicate successful, right? So like 200, which we saw that the request was successful and the server returned the requested data. But in this kind of situation, I think the appropriate response code that we should have here shouldn't really be 200, right? Shouldn't really be 200. Okay, so if I send this man again, we shouldn't really be seeing 200 because I believe that if someone is signing up, they are creating something. So I believe the appropriate response code should have been 201, right? Created, which means that the request was successful and a new resource was created. So this is the most appropriate response code for that kind of situation. So every situation has its own response code. So you can just look them up. You can just look them up and see how they work, right? How they work. So another one again is 404. 404, and sorry, 401 is unauthorized, right? It means that a particular route is protected, right? It requires authentication and so on. Don't worry about that. We will see how we can implement this status code real soon. So let's go back to our software, our source code. So far, that is how response model is what is implemented, right? There's nothing really big about it. So like I said, these concepts are very simple and very straightforward. So that is what response models do, and that is their job, and that is what they are meant to do, to violate every response structure, right? Every response structure that is being sent out is being violated, right? Is being violated. So that is basically that. And also, if you also have a field that is not also sent out, this man will also let you know that a particular field is missing. So that way you can go back and fill it in, right? Very simple something, right? Very simple and straightforward. All right, so let's look at one more thing again, one more concept called the return type. So the return type, well, unfortunately, we not actually looked at it when we're looking at the basic of Python. Well, I think is that a return type is basically a means of specifying a type of data that is being sent out. So the difference is that response model defines a structure. Response type the return type defines the type of either the structure, yes, of the entire structure of what is being sent out, right? That's basically the difference. Please, am I making sense? this response type, return type, it defines the data type, right, of whatever is being sent out, while response model defines the structure alongside with the type for each of the fields. So let me just put that down so it makes a lot of sense. So I'll come up here and then I'll just put a note on return type. So return type, okay, uh return type is basically, okay, but that's basically what it will do. They just do things basically. Basically, they specify, or should I say it specifies, it specifies, that is not specified, that can never be specified. It specifies, right? It specifies the type of data, of data and endpoint returns. Right, so you could say different. This one defines structure and type, right? So the structure and type in a sense that this type is for the fields within that structure, right? This one basically just define the whole thing that is what that is coming out there, right? What type is coming out from that response. So it's not really about the return type is not really about the structure. It's about the type. So basically, I would say that return type is more superior compared to response model, because if I say that this endpoint should, that whatever is coming out of this endpoint must be an integer, right? It means that whatever is leaving that endpoint, be it in structure, be it in unstructured, be it in a single value, whatever is leaving there must be an integer. That is basically what return type does. So I would say that it carries more weight compared to what the response model, right? So let's see how how return type is actually implemented. So I said, this concepts are very straightforward and very simple. So let's see. So let's see how this man works. All right. So this man works in a very wonderful way. So it's simple. It's simple, right? So basically, what it does is you just go to your return function. So the thing is that, okay, let's just go back. Let's do something. Let's do something so that we can understand how this thing will work. I'll call this new .py. Unfortunately, we not look at this thing in back then when we're doing the base of Python. So the return type is mostly used with functions. So if you have a function, let's say a function that adds two numbers, right? That adds number, right? That adds two numbers. I'll say num1, right? Comma num2, right? And then the result is going to be the additional word of num1 plus the additional word of num2, right? And then at the end of it all, we can have what the return statement, right? The return statement that returns what this result, right? So basically, this is how our function work, right? And then if I should call on adds, right, I can simply say that so far we don't have any type hinting. So we don't really know what num1 and num2 is meant to be, what data type is meant to be. But you see this other last part. This other last part is what refers to the return type. So at this point, we don't also know what possible data type is coming back from that response, because so far we've not specified that in that function definition. So how do we do this? Remember, Python does not force these things. All right, it's basically for hinting. Of course, that's why I call type hinting. It's basically for hints, so that you know that when you're using this function, this is what is expected of this function, and this is what is expected to be returned from this function. So that's basically what is showing up there. So to correct this, we can simply come here and type hints, right? And be like, okay, num1 should be an integer, num2 should also be an integer, right? Colon, and then integer, right? And then if you now come back again to use this function, you can see that has changed. That is no longer any. So it's now that num1 is integer, num2 is also expecting an integer. But you can see that what happens is that the return type has also changed to integer, even though we will not really specify this. And this happened out of conveying. So Python just convey, or just assume that seeing this function is accepting integers as parameters, that this function will likely return integer as a type, or or whatever value is coming out from this response, or sorry, from this function is likely going to be integer. But what if this function takes in two integers, but then we are likely going to return something like a string? you can say that there is need to do what to correct that that assumption. So how do we do this in Python? So you simply come here, and then after your function parameter, right? After your function parameter, I would simply do what? I will simply put a dash, and then put what? Put an arrow key, right? And then in front of that arrow key, I can specify what type of data is expected to leave this function. So here I could say str string, right? That's simple. Now, if I go back again to use this function, right, and then do like this, and then you can see that we've changed that narration, right, by saying that this man takes in 2 inputs and 2 integer value, but will likely return what? A string value. So, like I said, Python does not actually force these things, right, to make sure that it is this way. But then it just helps for type hinting. It's only when we do it in Pydantic, in Fast API, parenting now comes in and makes it very compulsory, right? So it means that I can still come here and put I can still put like 1, 10, and 20, and then I will still get a return of integer and not string, but nothing still happens, right? But even if we've said that this function will likely be sending out a string, we can still override that. So I can still call this x, right? And then at the end of it all, I can say print x, right? I can also say print the type of x, right? The type of x, right? And then let's go back and let's execute this. You can see that this will work just fine. So we have 30 and what integer as a class, even if we said that this function is sending out a string, right? So that same concept works with Fast API. If I should now go to Fast API and do the same thing, the difference is that Fast API will make sure that it is compulsory, right? Make sure that whatever is coming out from that endpoint must come or must be of type of that particular data type, right? So let's go back and let's implement that. So going back to response model, all I have to do to implement the return type, which basically define the type of data that an endpoint must return, right? I simply need to come here to my route function, right? And then just put the dash, put this arrow key, and then put the type. I can choose to put integer here, right? And there's nothing wrong. Now, even if we have a response model that means that filter filter or by what is living here, we still have a problem. And the problem is that we are expecting that this endpoint is sending out a number and not this other structured data. So let's take this out and let's see how it goes. So if I come back to my server and I refresh, and I go back to this man and I send this man out, I shall have a problem that says let's go let's see. Hold on. Let's see. For some reason, hold on. Let's refresh myself and then be sure of what I'm seeing. All right. So let's go back and let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. Go back again and let's send this out again. And it still went through successfully. Let's do like this, right? Let's take off response model, right? Let's take out this response model and let's confirm something, right? So, and then we can come back and then we can crash every other query that I've set so far. So let's go back and let's refresh our server and let's send back this response. Okay, so let's go back again and let's send. All right, so there's a problem now. All right, so it seems response model somehow adwares the response type. So please scratch the other information that I said the response type somehow adwares response model. So at this point, response model adwares response type, right? I think so, yeah. So you said that what the problem is response variation error, and the error says should wait. It says so here we're basically saying the problem is from the response and the input should be a valid integer, right? So the thing here is that the response that we are expecting to leave this man should be a valid integer response, but so far we are sending out a structured data. So you can say that if you specify a response type then there's a problem, right? It means that what trying to send out does not conform to the type that we've requested for, right? So I think response type works best if you're sending out a single value, or even if a structural value as well, it still works best, right? So what I can do is I can come here and change this one from our native Python type to the custom one, and to the custom class that we are expecting to be sent out, which in this case is our user record. So I can copy this man and pass it as the type. And then Fast API will now know that whatever you are sending out has to conform to this type. And also we can also add the response model and for validation, right? For validation. So if I should simply send this man out now, by refresh my server, so this should now work as expected, right? This will now work as expected. So if I come here again and refresh my Postman, right? So that actually went through, right? So that actually went through. So one key thing that you should know is that it is recommended that if you have a response model, because remember the response model is used for what? Is used for validation, right? Of structured data. So if you have a response model, it is also recommended that whatever you are sending out should be of the same type. So basically your response, it should be REST user registration, right? So basically your response model should somehow match with your return type, right? So there wouldn't be any conflict. So the request type will somehow handle the kind of type, the type of data that is living, which in this case should be of this class type, right? And of course, the model should further validate the fields that we have within that particular class. So this is basically how return type works, right? So it makes sure that whatever is living is of that type, right? And but then if you have response model available, it somehow outweighs that return type. It somehow outweighs that return. So I think Fast API will prioritize this response model over the return type. So even if you have another return type, let's say of string, boolean, or any other type, the response model still dominates at some point, right? So please put that in mind as well. Question before we proceed to our last concept. So let's look at our slide. Let's see what we have there. So we've looked at response model. Okay, we have a response model and return type. Unfortunately, the return type did not fit into that title, but the return type. Okay. So what we have to do next is what is status code and the rest of those things. Question before we proceed. Question. All right, so the silence means no question. All right, so let's look at our ministry again. All right, let's look at our source code again one more time. So if you look at, like I said, like I said earlier, that each request has a particular response code, and every response code handles certain things, right? Every response code handles certain things, or should I say, it signifies certain things. And as a back-end engineer, it is your core. It is in your core core responsibility that every response somehow have the appropriate response code. So the thing is that most of the response code, Fast API actually handles them for you automatically. Like if you have a problem, right? It shows the appropriate response code, right? But then there are some that Fast API just use a general response code, like every successful response, or like every successful response use 200, which in some cases we may want to use like 201, which in this case means what? Created, right? Which in this case means created. So so in that case, Fast API will do what? Would default to 200 at the default response code. So how do we change that, or how do we handle that? How do we change that, and how do we handle that? So it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. So everything still boils down there, right? Everything still boils down there. So if you go back to our if you go back to our source code, if you go back to our source code, So like I said, your request function, right, takes in a lot of things like the path, the response model, and even status code. So if I put a comma here, there is a status code as well. So this is where we can provide a custom or yeah a status code that we expect or that we intend to use, which in this case is 200. So there are two ways we can do this, right? There are two ways we can do this. So there are two ways we can do this. So we can either just come here and put in the one our code to 200, right? Sorry, 201, and we are good to go. It's just that simple. So this code is just that simple. So we can either do that and it will work. So if I go again and then I refresh my server, all right, I request my server and I go back and I send a request again. So this one around we should be having 200, okay, 201 created, right? 201 created, right? So it means that the resource, the new resource was created. So it means the one that this data was collected and it was somehow saved or created or saved, yeah, saved to the server. So now this status code actually signify the actual purpose of this endpoint. So that is basically how you do how you would use the appropriate status code for your endpoint. But then there's still a problem with this mean because I can still come here and do a code that doesn't really exist. Let's say like 208. I'm not sure that there's 208. I've never heard of 208. But this will still somehow work if you send this code. This will still somehow work. But this is outside the recognized or the standard status code in web development, right? But then this will not be flagged as an error. So that is the problem. So if I send this man now, right, it's saying already report. Do we have to let me confirm that? Please let's go back and let's confirm we have. I'm not sure of 208, right? So I've never heard of 208 in my entire existence. So this is the only status code that I am aware of. So 208 is something that I'm not sure happens, or I'm not sure has ever happened before. Right, so okay, let's try 600. I think all status code ends at 500, right? So let's try 600. Let's go back and let's use 600, which is something that should not really exist. All right, if you ask me, there's no status code that is 500 is the I think 5 or something. It stops in the range of 5, right? So there's no 6. But let us try 600 and you see that this will still work, right? This will still work. So I go back and I click on this and I refresh my server and come back here and I make this request again. Okay, all right. So I think that did not actually work, right? That did not actually work. So okay, so that makes sense, right? So that makes sense. So even if you put a wrong code, a fast API also try to make sure that code that you are sending, right, is actually recognized in web development, right? But to avoid this kind of problem where you mistakenly put a wrong code, right, and your code can actually collapse. Fast API also have a status model where you can bring in and so that and choose from that model. That way you don't get to do what to make this kind of mistake of using a code that does not exist in web development. All right. So how do we do that? We simply bring in status from Fast API. So I come here and I import status from Fast API. So status is a man that holds all the built-in web development status codes. So that way you simply get to choose from it and you don't have to guess these numbers, right? You don't have to guess these numbers. So you can simply do that by simply coming here and I can say status, right? Status, and then I'll say dots, and here I have all of them. So this is all the status code built into Fast API. So in the case we wanted 201, where we did okay, so 208 actually exists, right? That's nice. So there is 200, there is 201, 202, 203, 204, 205, 206, 207, and 208, right? So that makes sense. So if we needed the 201, we simply just create on this one created, and that is that. That way we don't get to guess those numbers, so that we don't end up making mistakes with our status code numbers, right? So if you refresh this man now and send this request again, well, this should go just fine. This way, we don't make mistakes again, right? So this way, we don't make any mistake of putting in a wrong code or guessing those numbers, right? Because what we did there, we were actually guessing those numbers because. So like I said, no one expects you to memorize all those code in your head, but they are commonly used ones that people use most often. The more you use them, the more it stays in your head, right? It's like 201. 201 is commonly used for what? For creating something in the database, right? To create something in the server, 201 is mostly used, right? 404 is mostly used as well, trying to get a wrong URL and all those stuff. All right, that's that. That is basically that. Okay, question, question. Before we look at one more concept, before we look at one more concept, which is what is it? Before we look at one more concept, which in this case it will be error handling, right? Question. All right. So let's proceed. Let's proceed. Let's proceed. All right. So let's go ahead and let's proceed. Okay. So let's look at error handling, right? Let's look at error handling because so far we've not really looked at error handling, right? So far we've not really looked at error handling. So I'll leave those stuff as it is and we'll just add to them. So error handling, let's assume that we have our own kind of errors that we are trying to hold, right? Let's assume that whatever this user has sent in has been validated, right? And there's nothing wrong with what has been sent in, right? There's nothing wrong with what has been there's nothing wrong with what has been validated, right? So I'm assuming that, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And the problem here is this, right? The problem here is this now, okay? What if we somehow, let's assume that we were trying to.
There's a question on the channel, in the group.
Okay.
Be on the chat.
All right. What's the difference between summary and description? Okay. Okay. The difference between summary and description. I think that difference actually take effect in the documentation. Right. So let me navigate to documentation and let's see. So the difference is mostly in the documentation. No, not really that. It's available in /docs or redoc. Let's go to docs. So I think docs does it more. Or let's also go to redoc. Let's go to redoc as well. Go to redoc. Redoc. All right. So the summary is mostly in the documentation. So I think if you click on here, let's see, it's loading. So I believe that summary is mostly a summarized version of what your endpoint is doing, and I think it's mostly available in this up part. Like it should be a write-up that shows up here, right? While the description is something that is more detailed. Like if I click on this thing, I could see a more detailed explanation, right? But we talk about how we can do documentation sometime in the future. But to answer that question properly, let's just put that and see so that we can see that difference for ourselves. It's mostly in documentation. So up here, I'll have a variable called summary, right? That will just be, I'll call this is a summary, right? And description. So this is mostly done towards the ending part of your project when you're almost done and you want to do what and you want to have a detailed explanation of what each endpoint is doing. Of course, this way you can start doing that thing. Right. So this I'll say this is a detailed description of what this endpoint is doing. All right. So let's go back and let's fill that in. So I'll first come here and I will put a comma there. And I'll come here and I'll just call this summary. So let's bring summary here. And I'll assign it to a variable called summary that we have up there. And I'll put another one here and I'll call this description. And I'll assign this to a description that we have up there. Right? All right, so let's go back and let's see that in our. So please, summary and description doesn't really affect the functionality of your endpoint. It's mostly for documentation, right? It's mostly for documentation purposes. All right. So if I come back to this man and refresh, this should somehow fill in this place. So you can see. So the summary is what shows up here. Like I said, a very short message. By default, if you don't specify the summary, your function name is what shows the left. So previously we saw greetings. So greetings was gotten from this function name. So without the summary being specified, the API definition takes the function name as the summary, because it assumes that your function name should somehow tell some meaning about what that endpoint is doing. So, but then if you don't specify a summary, that will now replace, and that will now be showing up there. So if you click on it, you now have a detailed section for the description of this endpoint, right? That's basically what summary and description does, right? Is that okay? Right. So I want to believe that I've answered that question. So I believe it should also be available here as well. So if I refresh my route, this should show at some point. So we have the summary there, right? So the good thing about this redoc is that if there's no summary and description, it doesn't even show, right? So before I can say that it never even show even that greeting. But if you have the summary now, it shows here. It also shows here as well, right? And then of course, if you click on it, you can have the detailed explanation of what is happening in this documentation as well as so this is very, very wonderful. So you can see already that there are so many things that has been done for us. A full website of documentation. Imagine us now building this endpoint and then coming back to the work to now start to build a full website for documentation. And it's crazy, right? It's first API to the world. All right. All right, so let's proceed, right? Let's proceed. Okay, that's fantastic. So he has concluded that he has confirmed that explanation made a lot of sense. Okay, let's go back and let's continue. Okay, we will still leave a summary and description there. So sometime in the future we'll come back and we'll look at what the details, the things and things. Sorry, things and things sounds weird. We will look at the things that we can include in documentation, right? So when we get there, we will see other interesting things, right? Because there are so many things that we have to embed so that whoever is using it can have a proper understanding, so that they don't end up, not using what is not even, not using what shouldn't be there. Okay, so let's come back. Let's continue. Okay. So I was saying, how do we handle a custom error? How do we do custom error handling? So it's pretty simple. At times we want to handle some errors of things that Fast API has not really covered for us. So something like, let's say someone signed up, right? Assuming this is someone that has tried to sign up, and then at some point we want to make sure that we don't sign up someone with the same email. So let me say I'll assume and that there is logic here. I think that there is logic here. Then when we get to databases, we look at this logic again, right? But for now, assume that there is a logic here that checks first if a user with the email already exists. You get? So this logic checks what if there is a user with that email before sending them up, before registering them, right? Before registering them. Registering sounds weird. Before registering them, please. Not registering. All that. All right. So before registering them, right? We just check that. We assume that there's a logic there. Just assume that there's a logic there that checks, right? If a user with that email that we're trying to sign up with, in this case, this email here, this is the email I mean, this email that we are trying to sign up with. If there's a user with that email already in our database, then we don't want to do what? We don't want to sign that person up, right? Or in this case, we want to throw an error. But at this point, Fast API does not cover that kind of error handling, right? So we have to handle it by ourselves in this kind of situation, right? So how do we do that? So here I would assume that if the email already exists, right? Then this is what we want to where you want to handle error, right? So how do you do that? It's simple. All this, like I said, all this concept is very, very simple, right? And you may be wondering, do we bring in try and escape? Of course, try and escape still work in this man, right? Try and escape still works, right? But then when we try, let's say we now try some maybe we try to register, right? We try to register. So we try to register. We try to register, right? So I put pass there. But then if there's a problem trying to register, we do what we accept, right? And then this is where we can do what we can accept, Abi. So now, how do we now accept? Because if I should come here and say return, if I say return something like this, right? And then here I want to return a message saying, let's say a message saying, there is a problem, right? There is a problem, right? We know that that if we try to return, so let me make sure that let me take out this man so that it allows us to do what, to send out this response, right? But take out this man and take out status code, right? So I want to show us a simple illustration, right? I take out those men, I take out this man so that it can just send out this man as it is. All right, so if I try to do this, let me try and cause a problem. So let me assume that this is the problem of 10 divided by 0, right? This is a problem, right? This is a problem. We cannot do this in programming. So I want to assume that this is this is all doing what, registering this user. And we've realized that this user email already exists. So there is a problem. So as such, the accept should do what, should fire up, which in this case they should return this message saying that there is a problem, or there is, or I would say user with that email already exists, right? User with that email already exists, right? Exists. Abi? Now that's the case, right? Now let's go and let's test this out. Let's test this out. Please confirm that you guys can hear me properly, because it's kind of loud at my point because it's raining over here. Please confirm that that rain is somehow not affecting my voice and you guys can hear me clearly. I believe you guys can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So just to be sure, because of that rain, I've closed everywhere, but the rain is somehow coming to. It's getting loud. It's becoming very loud. Okay, so let's go back and let's run this man, right? So I want to assume that we've already registered with this email, and now we are trying to do what, we are trying to register with this email again. So in this case, if I should do this, you see, the problem is what user with that email already exists, right? But we are having 200 as the response code. It means that request was successful, which in actual sense, we don't want this request to be successful. There's a problem, so there is no point of having a successful message. And also, we cannot also go and do what, and set status code to a specific number, like 404, right, where there is a problem, right? Because if we do that, even if there is no problem, we will still default to that same status code, which we don't want that, right? We do not want that. So how do we do this thing? Well, unfortunately, there are so many things that we not really do back then in Python basics due to time. Unfortunately, we can do what, we can force and raise our own error, right? We can force our own exceptions. So I don't know if you guys did some research on your own when we're doing error handling. You will have seen that we can raise our own exception. Like we can force a problem to happen, even if there was no problem. We can force it using a keyword called raise. So that same concept still works here, right? So I can use this raise keyword and do what, and raise and force a problem, right? So when you use raise, you can say that every other thing that's come after that raise is showing faintly, meaning that when pattern comes across raise in any place, it means that you want to cause a problem. So that means that place should be seen as a problem and not as a normal message saying there's a problem, right? But every other thing should stop. Every request should not actually go through. It should stop and raise that problem and raise that thing as an issue. So in this case, how do we now raise? We simply use the keyword. But since we are dealing with web development, we we won't just raise a string and say there was a problem. Of course, this man will raise in the console. So we've moved past that level of raising a basic string as a problem, right? So how do we not do this problem, or how do we not resolve this issue? So we can resolve this problem by bringing what we call a HTTP exception from Fast API. So Fast API has a function called HTTP exception. So it's a function that it is a function or is a model that we use to raise a standard web problem, right? To cause a standard web problem, right? So we have to bring this man and then use the raise keyword and do what, and tell Fast API, please let the end user, let the client know what that there is a standard web problem with this particular code. So with this HTTP exception, we can do what we can pass the appropriate code as we want, right, for that particular error. So doing that, we can come and say raise HTTP exception, and then this man takes in one important thing, the status code, right? The status code, because every problem must have a code. So in this case, I can have my standard code back again. So status code here, right, which should be status, right, dot created, right? But then here I can come here and do what, and provide another code that should be raised if there is a problem, which in this case I could say 422, right? 422. So I could come here and say status code should be equal to what? Status dot 422. Let's see what 422 has to have. Something pertaining to 4. 4 is always a problem. I could say not acceptable, right? Not acceptable. Okay. And I'll click this. Right. So now I can raise that kind of code, and I can also have a message called detail. So here I can pass in any relevant information that I want the client to see, which in this case it will be user with that email already exists. So I'll come here and I'll paste that man. That way everything should work just fine, right? Everything should work just fine now, right? So let's go back and let's try this man out. So I'll refresh my server, come back here, and we'll just send this one again. And now you can see that we have the appropriate response code alongside with the appropriate message saying that the user with that email already exists with the appropriate response code. So now you can see that that message did not just come in as a normal message, but it came in as a problem. That way the client or the end user would know that that is a problem, because it's not even funny that I am seeing a status code of 200, but then I'm getting a message about that there is a problem. It's as if I'm wearing my left shoe in the right leg. I'm wearing the right pair of shoe in my left leg. Right? That is confusion, right? A 200 response code with a message saying that there is an email with that that is a user with that email. Why even process the request if there was a problem? So that is how you do what. That is how we handle errors in Fast API, right? We bring in the exception class, which is what the standard class that Fast API used to identify or to notify that there is a problem somewhere. So as such, the client should somehow know how to process that, right? All right. So that is basically that. That is basically that for those concepts. So you could see that we've covered four concepts in the space of 2 hours. So Fast API is a very simple and very sweet and very lovable framework that backend developers use a lot, right? If you need an API or a backend to be up and running in 5 minutes time, sir, Fast API is the way forward. But you see Django, you see, all right, please, Fast API is the go-to for quick API development and beginner friendly. Question on what we've done so far. Question on what we've done so far. Question on status code. Question on error handling. Question on response model, and question on return type. Right. Question on any of those stuffs. Question on any of those stuffs. Okay, Mr. Gabriel, your hand is up.
No, it's good morning.
Good morning, sir.
It's not about this thing. What do you say about Django, please?
Well, so Django is another Python web framework, but it's mostly used by full stack developer. But so full stack developer are people that understand how front end work and how back end work, because Django gives you room to develop both the front end and the back end, right? And it also gives you room to create endpoints. So it's a bit stressful to set up APIs in Django compared to Fast API, right? It's a bit stressful to set up just APIs, right, with Django compared to Fast API. So with Django REST framework, please, Django REST framework is a man that handles that, but Django REST framework needs to be installed with Django. So you see there's a lot of confusion there up and down. There is Django as a framework, and there is Django REST framework as a framework as well. But Django REST framework needs Django framework to be installed. What a confusion, right? So that I'm saying it's a little stressful. It's a bit stressful, right? But then if you understand how it works, you will say that it's simpler, right? But if for someone that's coming into backend newly, Fast API is more straightforward and less complicated. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. How do we? Any other question, or should we look at one more parameter and then wrap it up? We can go back and look at least one more parameter. Maybe that is what we'll be doing each class. We just go back and touch. We still have like about about four parameters left that we haven't really touched. So maybe each class, if we finish on time, we can just go back and touch one more parameter so that we add to the list of means of collecting data, right? So far we have just three means, either via path, query, or request body. We have other means too, right? We have other means too. So maybe we can just touch like one extra parameter and then we can wrap it up, right? Is that okay? Is that okay? Can we do that?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, so let's look at one more parameter, right? Let's look at one more parameter. So this other parameter is even more simpler to collect data from, right? Especially if you are working with, especially if you are dealing with front end guys, right? Especially if you are dealing with front end guys. So it's even more easier to work with that. It's even more easier to work with that, right? So let's assume that that your front end guys, right? Let's assume that your front end guys, okay, somehow they don't really know how to send structured data. That is, they don't really know how to send a JSON data, which is ultimately weird, because as front end guys, you should know it is in their duty that they know how to do what to do that, right? But just assume that they somehow find that difficult, because most of them are just are familiar with a situation where they just have a form, all right, and then they just put a button that should somehow submit that form. Let me take this man out, and then once you click on submit, they expect that whatever they have in this form, right, should somehow be sent to the server, right? Some of them work like that, right? In that case, how do you help them? Because this is you helping them. This particular parameter is just to help them, right? It's just to help them, right? So it saves them from the stress of making a custom script that should collect every information that we have in this field. I believe that we saw this wonderful front end that I built in my previous class. So let's open up this front end. Very fantastic front end, right? Built with passion, right? But built with passion. So the passion is what matters, and not really the design. So leave the design, focus on the passion. I built this website with passion. Okay, Mr. Gabriel, your hand is up. You have question? Mr. Gabriel, your hand is up. Gabriel's hand is up. All right, let's see. Let's see. For some, I think for some reason his hand is down.
Sir, what I want to maybe I come not deviate. Those using Java, we communicate with them. Can we work with them?
No, I didn't hear. I lost you at some point. Please, what was the question again? Is he still with us? For some
Okay,
reason, it's
my
not with. Okay.
question is those using JavaScript to create their front end, can we work with them?
Yeah, we can work with anybody regardless of any language, right? The thing here is that whatever they are sending to us has to either come in a JSON form or be attached in their URL. All right. So path and query parameter can be attached to any URL. URL is URL and their strings, right? So we can work with anybody in any domain. And be it app developer that works with Flutter and that, be it front end guys that work with frameworks like React and request URL is URL, right? And path and query parameters lives in the URL. So there is no other URL is a general recognize something, right? So it's not something that's what we are. It's only when they want to do was send something like a structured data that needs to come in a request body. Then they have to find a way in their own language and convert that data to what a JSON data and send it alongside what the request section of that request, right? So we can work with anybody. Right? We can work with anybody. All right. Barry, your hand is up.
Okay. So I wanted to ask if you can use that link we created, that our backend link that we created to create a front end website like this. That what we created before. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying.
Like if I can use this our domain name here, this our local host domain name here and create a front end.
Yes, that will work. That will work according to how the other one was working. Like first name, last name, email, and password. Like let's see how we can work together.
Okay, that's basically what we want to do now, right? That's basically what we want to do now. So that's why I'm saying that this particular kind of parameter is us helping the front end guys, right? Just in case they cannot do what they are meant to supposed to do, right? So we can help them, right? So how do we help them? So most of them are comfortable just building out a form like this, right? And then once the user click on submit, the form will just send the data to the server. Most of them like easy work, yeah? Very easy something. So most of them wants that, right? Most of them wants that. So, but in that situation, in that kind of situation, how do we help their career? How do we, how do we help their career to move forward? All right, so Fast API has another parameter called form parameter. So this kind of parameter is basically used to collect information directly from an HTML form like this, a browser form. So you don't have to go through any. You don't have to. The front end guys or the client doesn't have to go through the stress of collecting all the information in this field and converting it to a JSON form, right? So Fast API has a means of collecting it directly from this form as it is, right? With ease, right? With ease. But then the work now will now be on us, right? And no more on them. So let's see how that can be implemented. So we'll go back to parameter again because parameter is what is meant for parameters, right? So form is also what another means of collecting information, right? It's another means of collecting information and it's mostly called form data, which is mostly used to collect data sent from either HTML forms, right? Basically any form that is using a form browser, right? Form browsers, right? Specifically. All right. So how do we implement this? So it's simple. Fast API also have a function called form. The same way we have path and query, right? We also have form. So form is what we use to do what? To create variables or create URLs that should be collecting user and form data that should collect data directly from where? From the form. Right, so let's go back and let's look at our endpoint that we have so far. So we have our this particular URL here, right? This particular URL here that basically collects structured data. Remember, if I put a variable that has a type of our class, it means that that data is coming in as a JSON form in the request body, right? So let's assume that the front end guys are incapable of doing that, of collecting their data, converting it to JSON and sending it, right? So let's save them that stress. So what we can do is we can come here and we can create another one, and this one I'll call user registration dash form, right? So this one means just send it from where? From the form directly. You don't have to actually convert it. And of course, we will leave it as it is. But then the thing here is that we now have to come here and do what? And specify each of the field that we want. Each of the field that form should have, not really what of that form should have, which in this case, it means that each of these form here has to carry that name. So if I have a form name here, because every in the front end, each of these field has attributes. So they have a name attribute. So in this case, I can say that let this form be called, or let this input here be called first name. So here it means that in my back end, right, that I should make room for what? For a field called first name, right? So that means I have to come back here and fix that, right? I have to come back here and fix that. So I would come back here and I'll say first name, right? So I have to specify all those things. First name, first underscore name, right? And then I can do what? I can type script. Sorry, I can type annotate what this field should be, right? So it should be an integer. Remember, if I intend to add additional variation, I have to bring one annotate, like what we did back then. Where is it? What we did here, right? So that we can maintain both the type and any other variation, right? So I have to come back here and then I say annotated, and then in square bracket I can say this must be a string, and in brackets, and this must be what? This must be a form data. This must be a form data. And here, this now tells us that we are expecting a submission from directly from HTML form, right? That this route is expecting submission from directly from HTML form, and that form should have a field called first name, and the first name should be of what? Of string, right? So that means I have to repeat this same thing for all the fields, right? So that means I can come here and put comma. So I'll just break this into multiple lines, right? I'll break this into multiple lines. So I'll copy this man again, and I'll have for first name, sorry, for last name, I'll have for email, I'll have for what? Password. I believe that's what we have here. So last name here, and what again? Last name and then email. All right. So meaning that all those things are coming in from where? From HTML forms, right? And they should be seen as what? They should be seen as form data. Someone has written on my screen, and they should be seen as what? As form data, right? Meaning that first name, last name, and email are not expected to come in as a JSON data, but then they should come in directly from the form. So this is us telling them, don't stress yourself. We know your condition. Let's just help you. This is us doing that, right? This is us actually doing that. But then we have to go through this stress of doing this thing multiple times for all the fields, right? For all the fields. All right. So let's go back again and let's see how what we can do again. So let's go back to our form and make sure that we have all those things available. So this man here would be a name of what? Of last name, okay? And this man here will be a name, a type, a name of what? Of email. All right, and then submit. All right, so that's basically. Do we have password? I think we do. Let's go back to our parameters. We have password. Okay, yeah, we should have password as well. So I'll duplicate this man. This should be what? Password. All right, please, sorry about that. That is the consequences of rain falling in Nigeria. Because rain falling, network is cutting off. It's gone. All right. So please let me put up my screen again. Let's put up my screen one more time. Hold on, coming. What is happening now? All right, let's share the screen. Okay. All right. So I was trying to fix in the password, right? So we have password there and we have that for password. So what I want to do again is I want to bring in email, right? This email verification, right? So that helps us to verify our email field. So I have to import it for Pydantic as well. So I import Pydantic and then bring in that man there and then come here and replace this man email, right? So this will be email. All right. So then at the end of it all, I want to somehow send back. This response, right? So I have the first name and the first name here would be what the first name that we received, right? And I'll assign this to a data. So this is what we are sending back once has been sent. So I will duplicate this. So this will be last name, and here would be last name. Duplicate, paste. Email. This will be email. Duplicate, paste it, and password. This will be password, duplicate. So now you see the stress that they're putting us through just to help their life. All right. So let's go back and let's see. Okay. So now we have that. It means that the front end guys are ready to do what to submit these things directly from their form without the stress of completing this man to a JSON form and sending it to our endpoint. Okay. So let's take this out and let's see if that is working. So I'll go back to my server. And I would, what I want to do is I would change this again and make sure that I want to read the parameter file. So I want to execute the parameter file and not the response again. Remember that is available in parameter. So parameters on app. All right. So it says. Oh, okay, we have to install this man as well. So to actually use form data, we have to install Python multipath, right? So basically you don't just copy the command there and just paste it. So to use form data, we have to install Python multipath. So do that and then click on install. That should run that installation for us real quick. And that shouldn't take much time. It's about 24 KB. All right, so we execute again and we have our server up and running. So it means that the front end guys are ready to do what to test. So we copy our URL. So remember our URL we're copying. So we are not using Postman again because we've saved in the stress of converting all those things. So we copy our URL here, which is in this case, this is the URL there. And then I will go to my HTML file. So all the front end guys will go to the HTML file, okay? And they will just paste in the URL as action because the attribute action that's available for forms is basically the URL of where the content is being sent to. So in this case, it's coming to our URL. The URL here is I'll go back to the URL here is dash form. So you have to add dash form. So we come back here and we say dash form. That is the URL that they are sending this thing to, right? And that is basically all they have to do in their entire life. Just copy the URL and paste it in their form action, and then they are good. And then they are good to go. And also, they provide these names that matches with what we've always specified in the documentation, right? So let's go back and let's test. So I'll go back. I'll come here, and I will refresh my URL. So I'll cancel this man. Then let's go back again. Refresh this one. So I've refreshed that several times. So let's go back and let's view. So I will say first name email address, last name here. I will just put Basi. Okay, so I think we are missing password, right? So I think we are missing password. So let's go back and let's put. Yeah. Nice observation. Nice observation. Yeah. We are missing password. Let's go back and let's put in password. All right. So let's come back. I'll just copy this man as it is, and then just come here, paste it again, and here I will say password, and type here would be password, and the name here would be password. All right. Go back again. So that has nothing to do with our server. So you don't have to refresh our server. So what I'll refresh the page instead, right? We now have password. So I fill in again, fill in Xavier there, fill in Basi here, fill in one random name there, and fill in some password there. Yeah, some password there. And then once I click on submit, this should now be sent to our server. So it's that simple. So they don't even need to stress themselves. Right? So that was sent, and this is the response that they got. So you see, it's that easy. Very simple something. Very simple something. So that's basically all what they had to do. That's basically all what they had to do. Question about form data. So that's how form data works. It saves them the stress of converting to JSON. So basically, we just collect that information directly from where? From the form itself, right? We just collect it directly from the form itself, and then we can process it from there and do what? And send back the response. Question? Any question before we wrap it up completely?
Sorry, can you read this thing now, please? Like, just submit it. Let me see. I missed it.
Like I should submit. Sorry, I didn't really get your question properly though.
Yeah, I say you should kind of resubmit it. Let me check.
Okay, so all right, so let me submit again. So when I am filling this stuff, fill anything, I will just click on submit, and this is what they will get. So we've received it, and this is what our server sends back. So this response is from our server. If you look at our source code says send back what they submitted back to them. So that is that. So but then we've collected it and we've processed it. So if there is need for saving this man to database, then we have just done that. But basically we've created that room for them, and we've collected this information from these variables here, right? And then we can do whatever I want to do with it. And then at the end of it all, we simply just send back data.
Wait, my question now is, who is receiving this data now, and how are we going to view it? Assuming that somebody is doing it outside now, a user is doing it, how are we going to see it?
Yeah, if someone is, remember, as far as endpoint is concerned, interaction is done via request. So if someone like the front end guys is interacting with this endpoint, what they have to do is in their front end file, they have to do was specify that this data is good, that they want to send this data to this our endpoint. So this is our endpoint, right? That we've established here, right? That we have here, right? That is our endpoint there. So basically, when they submit that data, we can collect it via this variable name. So each of these variable name, right, that we've declared there, signify the fields that they have on their own front end, right? So once they click on submit, we can access them. We can access those values from their ends using these variables that we've declared here, right? And then we can do whatever we want to do. In this case, we are basically doing what? We are basically just sending back what they've sent for us. So you can see we have we send back the first name, the last name, the email, and the password, which is the form data that we've provided here, telling letting fast API know that this variable first name is a form data. Meaning that the value is coming from where? From a form. Same thing with first name, last name, and email and password. So when they click on submit on their form, we do what that data is sent to each of these variable names here, right? And then we can access it from their names, from our own ends, and do whatever we want. Do you understand?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Thank you, sir.
All right. So that's basically how that works, right? So when the front end guy send and actually submit this thing, then they are good. They are good to go. If they see need for the response, this is the response that they will get. If they don't see it for that response, then they can simply just reroute their front end guys to another page. It's up to them, right? But basically, that is how we can save their life, from saving them from doing what, from going through the stress of converting to JSON. So we simply collect it from the form data instead.
Can you throw an error here? Can you just write wrong email? Let's see.
Can I throw an error where? Mean here?
The email now. The email. Can you write something that is not email? Let you throw an error or something.
I didn't really get you though. I didn't really. Can I throw an error?
You know what? Yes, on email, like maybe write something that is not email. Maybe your name on the email on the form. Let's see what it will show.
Okay. So let's see what will happen. So first of all, they've already validated. They've already put in place that this email field should be an actual email field. So this is how front end validates their own fields, right? This is just a basic form of validating. So to change that, because if I change this now, if I try to go and submit that form without putting an actual email, the form will not even allow me to submit. So even if let's go back, let me put required, right? Let me put required. So this is most like a form violations for front end guys, right? That's how they violate their fields, right? So if I fill this in again, and then I put some random stuff there and some random password, so this man will never allow me to submit, right? Unless I put in a correct email there, right? So let's just take off that violation, right? Let's take off that violation so that they can submit any random text, right? So let's change this to text, right? Change this to text. Let's go back again. Let's refresh. So you can see that what that already is telling us that an email address need to include this man, right? So that is how front end actually validates their fields. So I come here, I fill in save, I fill in password, I fill in email, I fill in password, and I click on submit. So this email has to be some random stuff, right? Right, so I click on submit. So this actually came to our server, right? But then there's a problem. So our server still sent back an error to them, telling them that there's a problem with their submission of form. So they can't actually submit that form because the email has a problem, that the value is not a valid email address, right? So our server still processes it just fine, right? But then it saves them the stress of going to convert it to a JSON and then sending it as a JSON format, right?
I'm kind of confused, Sha. Like
Where?
the user submitted the email and now they not notify
I don't know if
okay,
it's
this
my
email
end,
is wrong. So the user might insisted of this stuff. So can you hear me?
Okay, so what was the question? Sorry, I'm hearing you now. I think it's better.
I'm saying now, okay, like this now, the user did not get notification that this email is wrong. Do you get? So maybe he might submit and go his way without knowing that the form did not actually submit.
Yeah.
So is
Yeah,
there any
that
way
is
to notify the user?
yes. That is where that is the job of the front end guys. So when the front end guys are not even supposed to show this man, right? They're supposed what a front end guys is supposed to just do at this point is maybe they can come here and maybe add a on submit kind of event, right? I believe there's on submit event that should trigger a function. In this case, I will say my function, right? Assuming So basically, once they click on this thing, right, they should be expecting to get a response from us. So if there is a problem with that, then they should do what they should handle the appropriate interface of what the user should see if there is a problem, right? But then we've saved them from the stress of even sending a push request. So basically, what they should be expecting what they should be expecting is an error, right? So it is now in their place to do what, to handle what the client would see, right? So it's not really in our place. Our place what is to help them do what, submit that form and help them, let them know if there is a problem or if there is no problem, right? Or if there is no problem. So already you could see that I think there is a problem somewhere. So already they can do what, they can handle and what the clients can do what, can see, right? So it's not really our job to go and handle what the client sees. That is why it's front end. That is their role, right? But already we've streamlined that stress for them already. We cannot still also come and streamline the interface again for them, right? I don't know if you get the point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
get it.
yeah, so this message that is showing here is not really for the client. It's not really for the client. It's for the front end guys. So when they click on submit, they should be expecting what, to get 200 or 201. That user was created successfully. But if they get anything outside that, they should be able to do what, they should be able to debug and do what, and see that that is a problem with the email, and do what, and then show the appropriate message to the front end, right? To the client itself. So that's basically how it works, right? That's basically how it works. But the whole point is that we've done what we've done. We've been able to save them from converting this data, right, to JSON and sending it as push request. So we simply do what, we simply tell them, say, okay, we simply ask them to just submit it directly from their form, and we will handle it from there, right? And we will handle the collection and our response from there. That's basically all what we did. I believe that is understood. Question?
Yeah.
All right. Any other question? Any other question? Any other question? All right. So in the absence of any other question, I think we've overstayed. We've added about 20 minutes to our time, so we shouldn't actually go further. All right. So there is no tax this week, okay? So it's now 1 week in, 1 week out, and for your grading is still ongoing. Nothing to worry yourself about, right? Nothing to worry yourself about. So, like I said, teaching would end this month. Sorry.
I want to ask something, please. That sometimes we submit our GitHub, maybe we find an error or something. We can do correction. It won't affect our mark, right?
Yeah, it depends on when that correction was made. If it was made after the deadline, then that correction can boost you to the cutoff mark, right? But if it was done if it was done before, then it can take you to 100. But if it's after, highest, too bad, cutoff mark. Yourself try. All right. So that is actually that. So I think that is basically all for today's class, right? So we would, okay, so I was saying teaching would end this month. So I think if you look at the curriculum, we've basically covered almost everything. There's nothing really much about Fast API. If you go to Fast API definition, it's very limited, right? Because Fast API is very simple and straightforward and very basic, right? So before the end of this month, you guys should be done and should proceed to what, to project phase. Please do everything you can to be on that final stage before project phase. It no go funny. Let me just put it. It no go just funny. Say they leave you behind, right? So please, everything you are doing, no, let the last week of this month be your target, right? Be at the current level before the last week, on or before the last week of this month, right? So And then for any other classes that we need to reschedule to maybe to some other days outside our sessions, I will always update us in the group, right? I will always update us in the group. But I believe that so far we are still on track. We are still on track. We are moving steadily and slowly, right? We're moving steadily and slowly. I always tell people that it's better I I I don't cover the curriculum and people understand the part that I've covered than I cover the internal curriculum and people don't even understand what I've covered so far, right? I think the other option is more preferable, right? Is way more preferable because if I don't cover everything, but then the part that I've actually covered, people actually understand. It is easier for them to move forward without me, right? But then if I've covered everything, but yet no one understand anything, once I leave them behind, they've also left me behind, right? So that is just that, right? So not to actually worry yourself. The curriculum would be covered, but then understanding is my priority. If there is need to repeat any concept, I will repeat it, right? Rather than doing what going and continuing with the curriculum. Okay, so that is that. That is that. So keep that in mind. This last be on the final level on or before what the last week of this month. So the last week of this month should be your target because from next month's project phase, no more classes. I can only come in and host some meeting and explain certain things that your projects because you guys will be in separate projects. So probably someone from this project can be like, okay, let's hold a meeting. I'll go and join the meeting not as a tutor, but to go and explain what you don't understand. I will not come to that meeting and go and teach. I'll come and explain what that project is doing or what you're supposed to do in that project. Probably I'll review your code, tell you what should do, what should not be done, do this, do that, and stuff like that, right? That's basically what I'll be doing from next month. Right? It's not no more teaching, right? So please, everything you are doing last week of this month, right? Last week of this month should be the target. Be on the current state last week of this month, so that once I now because once next month comes, I'll be requested to submit all the names of people on the current stage, right? It's not that list that they now use and do what and split you guys to different projects, right? So they you now gonna meet your frenemies and at the front end and at the UI, where you'll be writing some back-end code in anticipation for one particular concept, only for UI. You now continue. That's not how it will look like. Now come back here and you touch it. It's always very fun, right? And also yes, it's always fun and fun and refreshing, right? You guys will learn a lot, right? You guys will learn a lot in that phase. So please, let's not come all this far and not be in that phase. It go too pain me. It go pain me past you. It go pain me past you when on that phase. All right. So that is that. So any other information, I will update us in the group. If there is need for us to meet over the weekend, I will still let us know in the group as well. But then after that, please have a very fantastic day ahead and enjoy the rest of your day. Please, whoever is the host, please unhost thyself and host me back. All right, Mr. Gabriel, your hand is up. You have a question?
Yeah, you said there won't be any assessment this week.
Yes, there is no tax this week. So it's now 1 week in, 1 week out, right? 1 week in, 1 week out. So no tax this week. So please, if you're not on the current stage, or if you're not submitted the previous tax, please use this time and do what I submit. Inform your colleagues that are still behind. Please tell them that that time is no longer on their side. 3 months is almost folding, right? I can remember where we started, but in twinkle of an eye, we are in a 10 month and it's almost folding. So please, inform your colleagues that people that are still left behind, please, you have 3 more weeks to wrap up things. Of course, I'm always available to grade, even from tax -0. I will still get and come, right? So regardless of your level, I'll get you down to the final stage, right? I'll create that. So, all right. So please, I don't know if Rian Senedo is still on this call. Please tell him that I need my host back before I pay transport down to his house and squeeze his neck. Rian Senedo, are you on the call? It seems Mr. Williamson has left us behind. All right, no problem. Don't worry. I will reach out to KodeCamp project manager. I think he has a means of getting that host back and ending the class for us. So please, I'll see you guys some other time in our next session. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you, sir.